Thank you, Bill. I think it's very clear, just looking at our challenge board and what the industry is doing, that ad fraud is a big deal these days. Fears of it eroding trust in the ecosystem and just all the money that's being wasted. What are the stakes here for not only just the future of programmatic, but just the future of online advertising if this problem doesn't get fixed in sort of a systemic way?
Well, you know, we all know about the incredible transfusion of money from traditional, from network television into digital, into online. I think the stakes are that that's going to stop, or that's going to not flow as quickly.
Right.
I agree with that. I think that the bad actors will continue to try and figure out ways to steal money. But I think as we move more towards a people-based metric and using first-party and second-party data to target users, that hopefully that will help eradicate the issue.
I think Bill said in his presentation that advertisers are the ones being hurt the most in this. Do you agree with that?
I think that obviously they're holding the money bag. Mm-hmm. So yes, from a financial standpoint, but I think that agencies as well are hurting, especially from managing the issue. There's a lot of there needs to be a lot more investment in the ad operations and analytics to really understand what's happening with the marketers' campaigns and trying to solve it. And using a technology solution or point solution isn't just the solution. Right. So it really needs to be a team effort.
Right, and I think the difference here, and you might agree or disagree with this, is that for a lot of the approaches here have been, well, let's just root out the fraud from a tech perspective, right? So you have companies like White Ops looking at it from just, let's look at our inventory, let's find the bad actors. But is this an issue that needs to be larger than just detecting the fraud, but questioning the incentives or the structures that led it?
I think it's a huge issue, and make no mistake, this is just the start of our journey. You know, I'm not even sure what's around the corner a month or so from now, but I think that all of the players in the system have something at stake, and at one point in the presentation I had the word eliminate fraud, and then I added in front of it reduce eliminate, because eliminate ain't never going to happen. But I think that the industry just needs to be a watchdog on this and other related issues.
Right. And do you think, Angelina, that the sort of an industry level approach is really going to sort of move the ball forward?
Absolutely. But I am putting a lot of pressure on several of our trading platforms or programmatic platforms and our ad servers to help eliminate it. I think that at least from the agency side, those technology systems need to make sure that once they detect any sort of fraud occurring, that compensation back to whoever is delivering that activity needs not to get paid out. But I also think that on the client side or the marketer side, they're also, which a lot of conversations are around, is enabling some of their technology platforms to help communicate with those systems. So their site analytics tool, their tag management systems, and not a lot of discussions around putting pressure on those platforms to help out.
Right, so you're saying all of these point solutions need to be working closer together.
Absolutely.
And what's great about the industry solution, while ANA did the test with White Ops, this Transparency Action Group is ANA, 4As, and IAB, so it's got all of the right players in the mix.
Right, and you have someone who's from the regulatory, has a regulatory background running.
Yeah, you must know Linda, so right. Absolutely.
Right. So who do we blame? So I guess the big question, one of the problems with ad fraud is that the entire ecosystem sort of feeds it. So you have, publishers buying traffic, right, which also feeds into it. You have a lot of people in the whole ecosystem turning a blind eye to it happening. Is there one party that's at fault, or is everyone sort of like equally complicit? Very loaded question.
I think everyone's at fault.
Yeah.
I think I think fraud has been around since the first ad, well, not the first ad, maybe the fifth ad that was served. But, you know, search click fraud has been around, and it's just intuitive that display fraud was happening. It's just, we never had the tools to really identify it.
So what's changed if it's been around? I guess there's more money involved now, right?
I think awareness is, again, I said it on stage, one of my favorite lines in the past couple of years has been, you don't know what you don't know. Sure. We started using that line around agency trading desks 3 or 4 years ago when they came out, because many of our members were really unaware of what went on of the background of agency trading desks. So I say the same with fraud, that it's just been a lack of awareness. Again, it's not just in the advertising trade press that we see this written up, it's in the New York Times. So I think that the issue has been elevated.
Right. And yeah, as more people are writing about it, awareness increases, and then I'm assuming clients are asking about it more,
Absolutely,
right?
but I think it goes back to infrastructure again.
Sure.
You know, when it comes to margins or compensation and staffing, you know, how do we go about that? And it's easy to just say, you know, the media team or the media agency should focus on it, but it requires so much more than just a media team or an ad ops team to combat it. It really is an all-out agency, all-out publisher. I mean, it requires everyone's participation.
Right. Yeah, that relationship between the clients and the agencies is interesting. I think one of the recommendations you had in your presentation was to structure the incentives around this stuff. Can you just go over that one more time? And I'm curious, Angelina, what you think of this.
Sure. You know, incentive compensation, some may call it performance-based compensation, has been around in, I'll hesitate to use the word, but I will, traditional client-agency relationships for 10 or 15 years. Granted, I often hear from agencies they're not really sure how much it does incentivize them, but right now about 40% of our members have some type of incentive-based compensation in their traditional agency, client agency agreements. So the thought, and it's just a thought, it really, you know, hasn't been advanced that much, is that, is there something, and I'd be curious, not that, I'd love to ask her a question, I'd be curious, is there some way that clients can incentivize agencies? Does that make any sense to you to, you know, help fight fraud? I know it's part of what you do anyway,
Yeah.
but.
I think there's a challenge because the assistant media planner doesn't get compensated for it. They don't get bonuses. They don't get, you know, they get paid overtime. But I think there is, I think agencies should be rewarded for providing really good performance. But I also think it's a hard pill to swallow from the marketer side. That's what I'm paying you for anyway. So is to drive results. So I've been on both sides. Unfortunately, that incentive model doesn't get its way down to the worker bees. So.
Right. So I think we're going to be talking about this more tomorrow, but viewability is another big thing that often gets conflated with fraud, right? You see, if an ad is not viewed, people say it's fraudulent, or viewable, it's fraudulent. What do they get wrong with that discussion?
I don't think, and I think Matt's going to talk about this tomorrow too, is viewability or lack of viewability does not equal fraud. But what I do think is that they're very much paired together, and how agencies and marketers are going to be looking at buying true impressions as a currency, where it needs to be hand in hand. And not looked at as two different things. But again, viewability does not equal fraud.
Right.
Yeah, I think they're related but different. They all come underneath those scary headlines that we see, that 25 to 50% of the money spent on digital is wasted. Some of that's fraud, some of that's ads not viewed.
Right. Are those useful numbers? Or are they just to shock? Are they just, you know?
Well, that's actually part of the reason that we partnered with White Ops to try to, you know, put our finger on a number.
Right.
I think that, you know, they're a wake-up call. So to some extent that they may be a shock, they get people to pay attention that maybe things are not optimized the way they should be.
Right, sure. And it's sort of related to this. We've been talking a little bit about people-based marketing. Where does that interface here? I'm assuming it goes beyond just impressions, right? You're looking at the people behind it.
I think, as we, think about television and it's all about TRPs and GRPs, that is definitely a metric that is being looked at from the digital side. And as cross devices become holistically one, so tablets are going to be your TV monitor, and your television set is also going to be your source of internet. It's more important to understand who's actually seeing the ads, what messages they're seeing, and then what they're perhaps doing beyond that. So are they actually considering the product and purchasing? So as we look at people-based and taking that first-party, second, and third-party data and and integrating that all together, I think the effectiveness and efficiency will come.
So what are the pricing implications of this, right? So I think if you go to a client and say, well, we're gonna be using Rocket Fuel's new tool to look at their inventory, but it's gonna cost you a little bit more. I'm assuming that adds a little bit of friction to this, right? Because they're assuming that this is what they've been paying for.
I think that CPMs right now aren't really the CPMs or what we call true impression CPMs. I think they're actually 2 or 3 times higher than what we're looking at. So if we're looking at $1.50 CPM on the programmatic side, it's probably close to $5.
Right.
Yeah, I would agree with that. Clients have to accept that perceived prices will be going up.
Right. Have you had any pushback on that?
Absolutely, because the clients are saying, well, I thought that's what I was paying for, and that's the CPM rate that I want to go in with, and those are the results that I want. So now you're telling me that to combat fraud and viewability, that it's a lot higher than I thought it was. What's going on? And that problem in television or at home it's kind of in the background where they don't understand the implication, how it's all.
Which sort of gets
problem.
back to the initial question of what happens if it doesn't get addressed, right? Well, this is too complicated. My money isn't going to be spent efficiently. I'm just not going to invest in this stuff, right? So that's
But they're already investing in it.
But they're already investing, so not pulling back too much.
It's a false CPM they're paying now. There's no doubt.
Yeah.
Right. So speaking of CPMs, video CPMs are much higher than display, hence why you're seeing more video fraud than display fraud. Is it exclusively driven by, is that the exclusive cause of it, just the fact that they can make more money?
I think as a general statement, the bad guys are going to be going after the inventory that can make them the most money.
Right.
So that's the key reason why we see the video fraud much higher than the display fraud. So that's a general statement, but the inventory that is costing more money is the inventory that the fraudsters can make more money from.
Yeah, that's the carrot that they're chasing. And with the white ops, when you're working with white ops, were they spending as much resources looking at video as they were display, or what was the split?
So one more time.
So the question is, how important was the video side in the?
So it was whatever the advertisers contributed. So there were the 36 advertisers that and there were 181 campaigns. So some advertisers had multiple campaigns. So advertisers contributed whatever their schedule was for the month of August, and again it went into September. A couple of interesting things about the study is that it was announced publicly, and I remember seeing some write-up about that. Why did you announce it publicly? The bad guys will know about it. And to some extent that's true. So we believe that the fraud numbers, when we announce them, they will actually be higher than what they are. And also the time of year, August, September, was perhaps a lighter time of year for the inventory, so the fraud is likely higher. Also an incentive for the advertisers, each of the participating advertisers will get their own proprietary results. So White Ops, and I've been in some of these meetings, is meeting with these advertisers one-on-one. We're looking at the 36 advertisers, and each is identified where they stand in that stack. You could imagine the conversations are good with the ones that are 1 through 10. The ones that are 30 to 36, you know, are not so good. And all of that information is proprietary to the respective participants, but the full results get rolled back to the industry.
Interesting. It'll be interesting to see what the final numbers look like and what the reaction is to that. So we have a little under 5 minutes. I feel like there are going to be a lot of questions for this, so let's open it up if anyone has anything to ask.
One in the back.
Hey, so you guys know that White Ops is one of many vendors that are tracking ad fraud, whether it's Double Verify, Integral, Telemetry, whoever it might be. Same thing in the viewability space. You have a number of vendors doing it today. I'm curious if you think there needs to be some level of standardization on how you measure this stuff, because we've seen from our experience that, you know, there could be wild measurement differences between one firm versus another, how they measure the different types of fraud out there. Just curious what your opinion is on that, whether one vendor is preferable, or do you think it's going to be a whole group of them that sort of work together to come to some sort of standard?
Sure. There are multiple vendors. I hate that word, vendors. A vendor sells hot dogs at the ballpark.
Technology partners.
You know, there's multiple companies in this space. So, and you know, many good companies. We work with White Ops really because they came to us and we made the deal. But I think that there is, without a doubt, room for others to contribute their solutions.
I think two points on that. When the MRC accredited these vendors, they accredit them based on what they said that they were doing versus a standardization. And I think that's something that should be discussed with the MRC, is coming up with standards that all the partners need to abide by. Secondly, I think that from an implementation standpoint, it's not just the technology partners that's involved, but how different groups, especially who's touching the tags, be it on the ad agency side, the marketer side, and the publisher side, how people implement and embed codes inside these creative units varies. So that could actually cause discrepancies in why we're seeing different numbers from each of the different technology partners.
And you make a great point with the MRC. The MRC, I think, is one of the least well-known trade associations in the industry. I would imagine many of you guys know who they are, but when I first came to ANA, after being on the agency side for 20 years, I had never heard of them before, but they are, you know, essentially the guys that verify the ad measurement companies. So how do you know Nielsen has the right methodology? The MRC comes in and does their audit. So we have been in some preliminary conversations with George Ivey, who's the head of the MRC, and his team about somehow playing a role in this whole fraud, fraud debate, because we do need to know that the methodology that these respective companies are doing are solid.
Yeah. I would ask that, especially the people in this room, because I sit on the IAB Ad Ops Council and Technology Council, and there's only, whenever we have committee meetings, so we talk about TAG and QAG, there's not a lot of representatives from a variety of agencies and marketers, as well as on the partner side. So there's only a handful. I would say there's about 15 of us that meet on a regular basis. But there's obviously a lot more people in here that are concerned about the issue. So please, make sure that you get involved and provide your feedback and input into a lot of these organizations about what the challenges are, and not just come up with your own point solution. We need to work together.
I think we have time for another quick question. Anybody in the audience? I have a question for you, Angelina. Will this ever change unless brands are willing to pay a higher CPM? I mean, isn't that, you talked about that being kind of a struggle, but that seems to be like the biggest obstacle right now.
They're going to have to decide, do they want quality or do they not want to know what's going on? So I think people-based, or the reduction of relying on cookies, if you will, as we look to the future, that's just where it's going. So I think that it's inevitable, and marketers and agencies need to kind of, be aligned with it, because it's either keep a blind eye and just run very low cost inventory with having fraud in the mix, or paying what your real true CPM should be.
Gotcha. Well, excellent. Thank you very much.
Thank you.